The Author's Shelf.
The Author's Shelf.
The Author's Shelf. The Author's Shelf. It's about books and stuff.
Good afternoon, I'm Georgie Donaghy and welcome to The Author's Shelf. Now today I'll be chatting with author Nick Falk and illustrator Tony Flowers, who I can happily say is already scribbling away right now as we speak. Together they have created the winning series Saurus Street and have just launched books 3 and 4 in their new series Billy is a Dragon. They'll join me both shortly. Now it's time to sit back and relax as I bring you the stories beyond the page. You're listening to The Author's Shelf on 2SSR 99.7 FM, Sound of the Sutherland Shire. Coming up next, Nick Falk and Tony Flowers. Welcome back. It's time to introduce today's guests. The great thing about hosting my own show is that I can interview my favourite authors, or in this case, one of my favourite collaborative teams, Nick Falk and Tony Flowers. Nick Falk, when Googling his name, I came across a lawyer in the US. I quickly discovered it was the wrong Nick and the wrong profession. However, I did discover that the author Nick Falk is actually a practicing psychologist who lives with his wife and 2 young boys in Tasmania. Originally from the UK, Nick worked and travelled in the US, India and China before finally arriving in Australia. Nick first picked up a pen at the age of 7 and has been writing ever since. He originally wrote stories for adults but found his true literary love when he started making up stories for his children. 5 years later, it was time to start writing some of them down. One of Nick's creations is Troggle the Troll, a picture book about people munching beasties. Now, Tony Flowers, who's actually here in the studio with me today, he's an Australian illustrator and he taught himself how to make pop-up books and now produces prize-winning one-off handmade editions. He runs pop-up workshops for children at the Sherman Contemporary Art Foundation in Sydney's Paddington, and his first love, however, is regular 2D illustrations. Together, Nick and Tony have created the series Saurus Street for 6 to 9-year-olds and more recently created one of my favourite series, Billy is a Dragon. Here to discuss the collaborative process is Nick Falk and Tony Flowers. Gentlemen, welcome to the Author's Shelf.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Okay. Now, I've been warned by a few authors that the two of you can get into a bit of, or can cause a bit of trouble. Trouble is never far behind you. Now, do I have both of your words that you will be on your best behaviour?
You have my word, but I can't speak for Tony. He's incorrigible.
I, of course, am the well-behaved one of the partnership.
Okay, right. Now I'm really worried. Okay, all right, Nick, I'm going to start with you. I always begin by asking my guests what is their story. Please tell us, what is the Nick Falk story?
The Nick Falk story? Well, it's an epic, I think, one of those adventure ones like Pirates of the Caribbean, with a little more aliens and more space travel, I think. Now, my story, so I moved around the world in different countries. I spent time started off in Europe, as you can tell by my accent, then over to America, spent some time over in the US, and then lived in India and China for a while, and I went through the accent, before finally moving to Australia. And I used to work in the biotechnology industry, making drugs, which sounds very dodgy. And these days, I'm a practicing clinical psychologist, living down in Tasmania, of all places. It's been quite fun.
I did. When I met Tony a few weeks ago, I did say that I might, throw in a few Tasmanian jokes, and he actually said, "Well, I'm from Tasmania." I thought, "Oh,
he's an actual Tasmanian."
Oh, I'm red-faced now.
Don't sit too close; he might bite.
Yeah, Nick's the import. He doesn't even get the Tasmanian jokes.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that, Nick. Now, Nick, it's your turn to be quiet now. Tony, Tell us your story, please.
Well, my story is probably the same as a lot of people. I just rambled through things and lucked my way to where I am. I started off in fine arts. I was working as a glass blower and was trained in ceramics when I was at university. And then life just took me through many different paths, but all the way along I always enjoyed illustrated stories and also children's books. And I suppose I came back to it about 11, 12 years ago, and I thought, well, this is something I'd really like to hone my skills at. And I think I've sort of getting to the stage where I think I'm almost ready to start drawing picture books and be good at it. But I know as soon as I say that, I've got so much more to learn.
I think you do. I think you do fantastic at picture books. Now, I think what I should have done was I should have got you. You've got all your tools there. I should have got you to bring in your glass blowing tools. That would have been much more fun in the studio.
Would have been a lot warmer.
Yeah, it would have been. All right. Okay. Now, Nick, back to you. You're a little bit like a superhero. You're a clinical psychologist by day and children's author by night. Is writing your therapy?
Well, I am a superhero. I do fire lasers from my eyes at times. My flying is poor. I'm a bit overweight for that. No, I write in the evenings at weekends, yes. It's great fun. I actually, as a psychologist, I work quite a lot with children. And so it's amazing, actually. So I work with children who've been traumatized, who've been through a lot of very difficult things. But actually, drawing and making up stories together is a wonderful form of building a rapport with kids who've had very disadvantaged lives. So the job does dovetail with the writing more than you'd think. Not that I steal my clients' stories, but there's a lot of creative process.
I'm glad you added that line. All right, Tony, how did you get started illustrating?
Oh, look, I don't know when I started illustrating. I think I'm one of those kids that always drew, and then as I got older, I sort of didn't work out I was meant to grow up, and I kept reading comics and I kept trying to draw different comics or graphic novel styles, and I got really serious 10 to 11 years ago, I suppose. I was lucky enough to illustrate a small book series then with Steve Parish Publishing, which was my first professional publishing, but it's a real famine and thirsty famine or bust industry where I've been doing a lot of drawing at periods of time. Then other times I'll have nothing for a year or two, but I've honed my skills through international competitions. So I was making handmade picture books for competitions in Japan, and I was very lucky. Yes, I was very lucky enough to win a few. So they often invite you over for the award ceremony, which is very nice.
Oh, that is nice. Very nice. Okay, all right. Listen, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with these two gentlemen in just a minute. Welcome back. You're listening to the Author's Shelf on 2SSR. I have Nick Falk and Tony Flowers in the studio. Nick's on the phone, of course. You are such a successful team and work well together. I guess the big question is, how did you two team up to begin with? We'll start with Tony.
Well, Nick and I actually met on the beach in Tasmania. It was very romantic. It was just by chance. I decided to take my dog for a walk down in Kingston Beach, and Nick was working at the same place as my wife at that stage. And we're walking along, and basically my wife said, "You know Nick?" I said, "Unfortunately, yes, I have met him before." And then Nick started telling me this tale of illustrative woe relating to Sora Street. Did you want to pick up there, Nick?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So at that stage, Random House were thinking of publishing Sora Street, but they weren't really happy with the illustrations we had. So it was absolutely fate. I bumped into Tony. There he was on the beach, throwing a stick for his dog in the sea. And Kerry, his wife, I knew, so I worked with her, said, I was just telling her about these books. I had no idea Tony was an illustrator. And she said, my husband does a bit of scribbling with a pen. Why don't you get him to do a couple of illustrations? And then, the fate was sealed from there. He did some incredible drawing. I sent them to Random House. I really owe it to him. He got me across the line. Without those drawings, it would never have been.
So it was written in the stars then?
It was written in the stars. Very lucky to bump into him.
The starfish, I'd say.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Now, Tony's actually brought his sketch pad in, and as I said earlier, he's doing some scribbling, and he's actually drawing the character Billy is a dragon, and Billy's best friend Jeannie from book 3, Shadow Shifter. And what we'll do is I'll take a photo of that and put it up on Facebook later on so you can see what he's been doing. He's doing a colour version of it, and we'll give that away later on in the next couple of weeks. Now, Nick, how hard is it for you to let go of your work and allow your illustrator to run with your ideas?
Oh, well, actually, I really enjoy it. I think that's part of the fun is you create a set of characters and a story and a world. But I think what makes a good children's book magical is when someone comes in and adds to that universe. And Tony's illustration is extraordinary because he doesn't just draw what's on the page, but creates the whole world around the story. So it's actually wonderful to watch. Sometimes a two-dimensional world become fully three-dimensional. So I enjoy that.
And Tony, how well do you have to know the author you're working with? I mean, I would imagine there's a lot of description that needs to be picked up by the illustrator when collaborating that's, not necessarily... Do you know Nick, so you work well together. So
Yeah.
do you know what's in his mind without him actually saying, well, this is what I want?
I try not to go anywhere as mucky as Nick's mind, but it helps if you know the author, I think, as an illustrator. There's pretty much, when you talk about illustrating in a traditional sense, authors and illustrators often never meet.
Right.
So, and I've done a lot of work where I've not met the author, I've met them after I've done the illustrations for them, which is okay, because what I normally do with Nick is when I have one of Nick's scripts in front of me, we've quite often discussed on the phone back and forth while he's writing it, different ideas. So I've got an idea what's going to happen. But any suggestions Nick makes, I really take great delight in throwing them out and coming up with my own just to surprise him.
Okay.
I take some on board, but it's good just to see if I can challenge his perceptions as well. And actually, I do like pushing the stories in ways so that Nick gets surprises out of them as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think a good example is our recent series, the one we're working on now, called Ninjas versus Samurai, whereas the whole story concept occurred actually at the Somerset Children's Literature Festival, where me and Tony went and did some talks, and we sat down together late in the evening and came up with all the ideas. So it's very much a collaborative process. So I think it's lovely knowing the illustrator and author knowing each other. It makes it a lot more fun and a lot more creative.
Okay, all right. That sounds interesting. Welcome back. You're listening to The Author's Shelf. Now, Tony Flowers is here with me in the studio, and I have Nick Falk on the line. Tony, you wanted to say hello to somebody?
Yes, I wanted to say a quick hello to my two little lads who followed me along today and been very patient and throughout this interview. So I've got Josh and Tallis sitting on the other side of a piece of glass. And with that, just like to say a quick hello, boys. We'll see you very soon.
I think you get the good check there, good brownie points there. Okay, all right. Now, I wanted to talk to you both about your first partnership, Sora Street. Nick, will you please tell us how this series came about?
Yeah, no, well, Sora Street actually came about through my young son, Jack. I think he was about 4 or 5, and he used to always insist every single day I had to make up a story for him. We went on walks, and we create whole worlds doing that. And the story, or the world of Sora Street, came up from these stories I had to make up every time we went for a walk with the dog. And that's how really the whole thing evolved. And this idea of what happens if we had a normal suburban street, but there just happened to be a time portal back to the Cretaceous period, and a whole mythology about how that came about and what it would be like. And very much in that twilight world where the kids know what's going on, but the adults are oblivious. And so that's really how the series evolved.
Well, that sounds exciting. How many are in the series?
There are 6 books in the series.
Wow, okay. Tony, can you take us through your steps in illustrating this series? If I can take you away from your painting there.
I just do a couple of quick brush strokes. That's all done. Put my pen and brush down.
Well, we know that men can do more than one thing at a time, so...
It is impossible.
It is impossible.
He's actually put the paintbrush down now, Nick, so yeah.
So we're safe. Paintbrushes down, I can talk.
All right, do you remember the question?
Vaguely. No, look, the process for me was interesting. As I said, Nick and I met on a beach at the very beginning of this process, and I had no preconceived ideas about what the series would be. And I was rushing, I like this part's nice, it sounds very global. I was rushing off overseas, and Nick and I met a couple of days before I left. And it was one of those situations where Nick came and said, I'm doing this book, blah, blah, blah. And I was thinking, this could be interesting. What is it? And then he started talking about that. It sounds good. Send it over and I'll have a read. And I read it, and I sort of read it from beginning to end in a very short period of time because I enjoyed it. Had a good giggle all the way through. And I thought, if I'm going to draw this series, I want to do it in the series in a style that I'm very comfortable with. So I went for a very, I suppose, comic book style illustration because it would be fun and also add a lot of movement and character to all of the stories. So I did a couple of quick sketches and sent them off to Nick, and then I sort of forgot about it because I was going off to the States. And coming back through the airport, I was just checking my email, and I got a nice email from Nick saying there's good and bad news. And the good news was that they're going to do the book series, and the bad news was that it wasn't going to be 2, we'd have to commit to 4. so we had to overcommit ourselves. That was the bad news, which I thought was nice. But after the first one, because the first one had Tyrannosaurus in it, and we all pretty much know what Tyrannosauruses look like. After the first one, I had to go and do all this research into ridiculous dinosaurs.
I did try and write as many strange dinosaurs as I could in there, just to get you off.
I had to do a few for the first book for background, but as they went on, and I had to start doing Chronosauruses and...
Pachycephalosauruses.
Should I say Plesiosauruses or Plesiosauruses, Nick?
Plesios.
I know. So I was drawing a Plesiosaurus and doing all the research, but I had to go back and do research on skeletal structures and all sorts of things just to get the cartoons to look right, which was a lot of fun. I sort of enjoyed that process.
It's much easier down here because we have dinosaurs in Tasmania.
Well, that's right. That's why I could remember what Tyrannosauruses looked like. I had some teachers like that. But apart from the dinosaur side of things, of course, I had to do research into the whole world and environment around them and the interaction. And looking at characters is a really interesting thing. With the Saurus Street series, there's a couple of instances where we get there's a brother and sister team, and I get to draw Tim and Tam and sort of put in little markers that sort of show the family linkage. And then when you go through the house, there's background pictures, and the background pictures will be of their great aunt Gertrude as a young woman, so you get to show someone aging throughout as well. And most people don't think about that type of thing when it comes to like a fun, fast-paced, heavily illustrated book, but there's a lot in the illustrations. And I think the most fun I had through the whole series was over 6 books. I got, I think, a newspaper article into each one of them. So there was like...
the Daily News.
The Daily News. So a newspaper would come up when they'd be talking about a part of a story. So there'd be the main splash image, but I'd make sure all the sub-articles in the book would be relating to something that happened in another book. So there's a lot of little threads that would cross over, mainly for my own amusement, but that's about, that's sort of what I do, things for my own amusement a lot of the time.
It makes a world, that's world building. I mean, that's what makes it fun to read.
All right, that's sounds very interesting. I like the description there. All right, you can pick up your paintbrush now. Okay, crack the whip. Okay. All right. No, I had another question for you. All right, I'll talk to Nick first. Okay. Nick, what's the best writing tip that you've ever been given?
I think the best writing tip is a very simple one, is that we just pick up a pen and write. It's, don't get it right, just write. And often you're sitting there thinking, I can't think how this story's going to go. I can't think of any ideas. It was extraordinary when you just get a pen or just on a computer and just start writing. It's like there are all these ideas hiding in the recesses of your head. As soon as you start writing, once you've written for about 2 or 3 minutes or sometimes 10 minutes, these ideas start coming out as if from nowhere.
They do.
They've been hiding, and that's the best tip, is just every evening, just sit down and just write for half an hour. It doesn't matter what you write. Write the word elephant 100 times. Write about flying monkeys and space. It doesn't really matter. Good ideas will come. You'll be able to take something from it. Don't try and get it right the first time. I mean, with the Saurus Street books particularly, I would finish the whole book knowing that probably 5% of what I'd written would actually get into the final book. You have to go through that process and just enjoy writing stuff in order to actually come up with a book.
You do, otherwise it just won't come.
Yeah, there's right in the knowledge that what you're writing probably won't be used, but just enjoy the process, and then you take a small amount of that, rewrite it, and take 20% of that, and then write it again, and then maybe now you're starting to see something that's beginning to look like the book. And it's you have to enjoy that process. Don't get frustrated, I think.
You do. Yeah. I'm not going to interrupt Tony. He's happily painting away.
Look, I can do 2 things at once if you like.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to go to our giveaway intro, and I'll ask Tony his question in a minute. Was that subtle enough, do you think? Was that subtle enough, Nick?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, okay. When we return, Nick and Tony are going to tell us all about their new series, Billy's a... Welcome back. You're listening to The Author's Shelf. Okay, Tony, if you can pop that down for a minute, thank you very much. What other books have you illustrated?
Apart from the Saurus Street and Billy's a Dragon, my first series was called Dizzy and Friends, and it was an early childhood series. I was writing that series for my son Josh. It was before Tallis had come along, and I was looking around and I noticed that there were not a lot of Australian books for children of infant school or infant age, when they're 1 and 2, and all the other books that were available, and they're still about, and they're great books, but they're still there, would be all about pigs, mice, or rabbits, basically. So you'd have your Maisies and you'd have your Miffies and
Yes.
your Peppa Pigs. But I thought, well, they're all either domesticated farm animals or rodents and pests. So I thought it'd be better to have something with an Australian theme. So I had Dizzy was a koala and all these Australian marsupial friends. So that was the first series. And I've done a lot of work on anthologies and other collections. So I've done work with the National Library, the National Museum of Australia.
Wow.
I'm actually working on a book with the National Library at the moment.
Okay. Nick, can you tell us, when creating your stories, does the characters or the plot come first?
Very much the characters. Very much. So there's a semblance of this journey this character wants to go on. But I think it's very much about what would be fun, what kind of characters would be nice to create, what kind of settings and communities. I think character is king in any kid's story anyway. If the kid can't relate to the character, the reader, and enjoy going on a journey with that character, then it doesn't really matter where the character goes. So that's really key for me.
So do your characters talk to you and tell you their story? Don't put me on the couch there. No, I'm just asking
they
because
talk to me. I suppose I try and write through their voice. It's very much I'm pretty childish myself. I've got a mental age of about 8. So it's not too hard to then write from a kid's point of view.
Nick, I'm not quite sure where you are, but there's a bit of feedback there.
Oh, yeah, there was a bit of feedback, wasn't there?
Yes. Okay.
Hello.
All right. Remember, you said you were going to sit still.
I am sitting very
Nick,
still.
Okay.
Nick does not know how to sit still.
All right. That's just a bit of on-air scolding, listeners. Okay. All right, Tony, do you send... Yes, he's always quick to the attention there.
Yes.
Do you send off your illustrations to publishers for consideration, or do you wait until you're commissioned for a particular project?
It's quite interesting. I have had a lot of work go around to publishers for consideration. That has never, ever netted me any work.
Okay.
It's sort of the more traditional way to do it. I would say nearly every published project I've got has come through either knowing someone
Right.
who I then showed my work to directly, or in the case of like Nick and myself, where we've come up with ideas and we've collaboratively worked
Okay.
them up. And I'm doing the same with another author at the moment for a picture book series. And it's a little unusual way to approach it. And if you go to a how to get published workshop, most of the time they'll tell you that's not how it's done.
That's true. They do.
They do tell you that.
They're fibbing.
I don't think they're fibbing. I think it's just partly I have a relationship now with Random House.
Right, that's good. Okay.
And that helps. And even though different sections are sort of managed by different publishers within Random House, it's that relationship is still with them as a publishing house. And I it's like an extended friendship group in a lot of ways. It's not like a cold clinical business arrangement where I'm sort of handing in a manuscript and waiting for an assessment. I can ring up. I feel I can ring them up and say, I've got this crazy idea. What do you think about this?
Okay.
And they give me a bit of an indication first. So I feel it's worth investing time into concepts before you actually get contracts for them in a lot of ways.
Okay. All right. Now I want to talk about your Billy is a Dragon series. I really enjoyed this series, guys. I reviewed the first 2 on Creative Kids Tales, and I've just finished reading books 3 and 4, which I'll review next month on Creative Kids Tales. Nick, tell us all about Billy is a Dragon.
Well, Billy is a Dragon, I think, is very much born out of, again, it's always my kids, but it tends to be watching my young 8-year-old try and sort of broker his way through relationships and schools and the difficulties of which different group you fit into, and the kind of insecurities kids first kind of develop at that age when they wonder, who am I, where do I fit in, start to doubt themselves a little bit. And so it's very much about a young boy who is probably slightly oddball, doesn't fit into any particular social group, feels a little bit on the outer, who discovers then this extraordinary ability within himself, this extraordinary secret that he is in fact a were-dragon. And partly he's incredibly excited by it, but partly also this makes him feel even more different from other children. So it's the journey he takes through that. And then that's him. The world that we've had enormous fun creating is a world where there are either shifters, people who can change into something else, or normal people. But we've had great fun with the shifters by saying, rather than making them big and strong, why not have were-chickens and were-worms and were-wombats? And so people are born with the skill of turning into something that usually it's not something terribly impressive. And that's kind of fun, to have an army of were-chickens trotting around.
Now, I have to say, when I started reading book one, I was so convinced by the writing, I actually felt the dragon lizard's bite.
John, well, that's very pleasing to hear.
Yeah, I felt Billy's pain.
Was that because of the writing or those fabulous illustrations?
Oh, you forgot. I'm going to end up with an impromptu face paint in a minute. All right, okay. Tony, tell us, what was the prospect like for you of working on another series with Nick? Was it like, oh no, here we go again?
Horrifying. I keep pleading with Random House to give me a proper author, but they don't. They just give me Nick each time. No, as I said, we worked on the concept together. Nick had written Billy's a Dragon, the first one, and I read through it, and I made some comments, hopefully some very rude comments to him about how bad it was, and he came up with this fabulous story. And what was really nice is we got to a stage in that relationship I was talking about earlier with Random House where Nick and I were pretty much given free rein. They've been very trusting with me as an illustrator, and whereas I've had some jobs where I have to submit roughs and show them what I'm doing, with Random House I turn up just before the due date with a big pile of drawings and go, there you go, there's your book. And apart from talking about some of the concepts for the first book about margin illustrations, and there's what we call lore pages which show the background of the world that Billy gets around in. Apart from giving me the green light for those as rough concepts, I just get to go along and draw the whole books up without anyone editing me, which is quite nice.
I like that.
And working with Nick, I like to try, and as I said before, I'd like to try and surprise Nick. So it's nice to have Nick there as someone to see if I can have a bit of fun with and see if I can surprise him with how I take the story.
The worst surprise is when he draws me into the book. He drew me in as Uncle Chunk, the nasty relative of the Falls. Very mean of him.
But it looks so much like you.
And, I'm always a silly character.
Especially when you're a rhinoceros. That's dead ringer for you.
Oh, now I know. Okay. All right, without giving too much away. Okay, now I know. All right. How much discussion is there between the two of you during the process of putting the book together? Do you collaborate during, or do you just write it all down, which is just really easy as an author, and then give it to Tony and say, all right, run with it? Or do you talk? Do you discuss in between?
I know we do discuss. I think the first book, Billy as a Dragon, I'd written quite a long time ago. But then the whole point is, because especially in this series, because it was sequential, we were building a world, there was a lot of discussion. And then a lot of, as we were writing the books, a lot of the ideas that we came up with together then found their way into the story. So I think again, it's very much a collaborative process, and I think that makes it more fun. So we'll talk about something, I'll go away, then write it, and maybe take things in a different direction. And then Tony will then add things with his illustrations. And of course, because he's creating that extra part of the world in his illustrations, I can then use that to inform the next book in the series as well. So it's very much a collaborative process.
Okay. Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I'm chatting with author Nick Falk and illustrator Tony Flowers. I'm going to put you both on the spot here. Tony, what is your favourite part of the Billy is a Dragon series?
It would be one of the characters, which is Wes.
Wes, okay.
No, not Wes, not Wes. It's Jez, wasn't it? Wes's son.
Jez, the werewolf.
Wes's son, Jez, the werewolm.
So cool. A werewolm. And who would think that, werewolms have that much power? Go on.
Who would think that? But I think the fun thing is when I created these shifting characters, I had to work out how they looked as a human and how I could still make elements of them recognisable in their were form. And he was a particular challenge because he was turning into a worm, but it was so much fun, and he's probably the character that made me laugh the most throughout reading the manuscripts. And Talus, my son, that's probably his favourite character. So he's pretended to be a kung fu worm at times.
Cool. Nick, what about you? What's your favourite illustration from the series?
My favourite illustration from the series came in book 4, and it was a picture of a were-hamster leading an army of shifters into battle, wearing a tremendous military helmet.
Oh, yes.
So I love that one. I really do. I love some of the ones. One thing I'm really pleased Random House allowed Tony to do in books 3 and 4, I have these 2-page illustrations, and some of them are just wonderful. And there's another one, I think, when Billy sees his dragon folk, he's all over the breakfast table with his horrified family looking on, that I'm particularly fond of. book 2, and he's gone squiffy. He's not quite managing to shift into a were-dragon. He's got stuck halfway. He's a bit anxious about it.
That was fun.
I like that one as well.
I think that I had to draw hot dragons boogies or something was the script that I had to draw.
Dragon burgers.
Do you critique each other's work, or are you happy to stick to your own areas of expertise?
Oh, well, we like to insult each other occasionally. It depends if Tony's getting on my nerves.
So in other words, Nick does it all the time.
All right, Tony. Tony, what's your tip for budding young artists out there?
Budding young artists. I think one of the tips pretty much aligns with what Nick was saying. If you try and draw a finished drawing straight off the bat, you're going to come a cropper every time. You've actually got to spend time sketching and drawing. And just like a writer, you have to spend time getting to know your characters. I start by reading each manuscript. I'll go through and I'll note some particular points of action, but I spend a lot of time looking at the characters and actually spending time sketching and drawing those characters so I know them in my head before I start drawing them. You're listening to The Author's Shelf on 2SR 99.7 FM, Sound of the Sutherland Shire. Are you an emerging author or illustrator? Are you serious about taking that next step on your creative journey? Why not visit creativekidstales.com.au. There you can have a full author or illustrator profile, including displaying your work, networking with others. You'll also find useful tools such as a comprehensive publisher's listing, writing tips, competition information, author interviews, book reviews, and loads more. Visit the Creative Kids Tales website today. What are you waiting for? creativekidstales.com.au. Is there another series in the pipeline for you too?
Yes, there is. No, we've just been commissioned a new series, which is called Ninja versus Samurai. Frighteningly childish, but it's tremendous fun. And this is a lovely one because it's one we very much have been doing together. We pitched it to Random House with the illustrations in there, so it's really a collaborative process. So it's going to be great fun.
I can actually see some of those illustrations. Tony has brought them in for me to have a look at, and I'm eagerly waiting. So when did you say that was coming out?
It comes out next year, March. Again, it's 4 books in Italy. First 2 in March, I believe. Second 2 is June. So much like Billy is a Dragon. But 3 months between books 1 and 2 and 3 and 4.
Okay, all right. We just have our station manager in who just has asked me, can he have a quick word on air? So over to you, Trevor.
Thank you, Georgie. I just happened to drop in, but I thought the opportunity was here to say how much we appreciate you on air, madam.
Oh, thank you.
We love your program, and I know your listeners do. And as I represent all the staff, all of our wonderful volunteers, on their behalf, congratulations.
Thank you very, very
much. Fascinating. Glad I recruited you.
I'm all red now. You did recruit me. Thank you very much.
Well, your listeners can't see it. We're on radio.
I know. I know.
Thank
Isn't
you, Georgie.
that good?
Well done.
Thank you very much, Trevor. All right. Now, with that said, it's almost time to wrap up. Okay. Tony, are you ready? Tony, are you ready to reveal your picture? No one can see it at home, so I'll tell you if it's fantastic.
Yeah, it makes great radio. I'm revealing it now.
Oh,
How is that
great.
all?
Oh, I love the colour. Oh, look at the colour in the dragon. That's just...
This is what I'd call a good rough sketch. It's not completely finished.
And he did that when he first
nicely
arrived.
coloured.
Wow. Okay, I'm going to put that on Facebook later on. That is just magnificent. Thank you very much. Tony, thank you for joining me in the studio today. Thank you, Nick, for joining us via phone.
Well, thank you too. It's been lovely.
Now, if you'd like to know more about Nick, stop by his website. It is www.nick-falk.com, and you can find out more about Tony on his website, which is www.flowersink.com.au. Now, that's all for this